Hello everybody, my name's Tim Hughes. I'm the Director of Communications for Spirit Invest. It's my great pleasure to today host Marc Wiese, who's the Managing Director of Orion Wealth Managers, which incorporates Orion Wealth. It's our first video of 2026, so Happy New Year to you, Marc. Happy New Year to our viewers. We concluded last year by you doing a video helping our viewers understand the importance of offshore investing and getting some balance there as well. But what we didn't talk about and what we need to talk about, I think, is what's the methodology? Is there a particular way that investors can invest offshore? Are there different ways of doing it? Walk us through the process of actually being able to invest offshore as a South African or as a South African citizen, please.
Well, thanks, Tim. I think it's been a widely discussed topic probably in the past decade or so in South Africa, and I think certain misperceptions exist, potentially coming all the way from apartheid days and sanctions against the country and an inability to invest offshore during certain periods of our history. But things have changed, and interestingly enough, the borders in terms of moving money out of the country or into the country has been opened a lot more than it has in recent years. So investing offshore is honestly not that complicated as it was perhaps 10, 15, 20 years ago. And as I mentioned, certain regulations governing this process has been relaxed. And it's a fairly simple process nowadays if you're dealing with a professional company to assist you throughout that process. But effectively, when one wants to invest offshore, there are a couple of ways to go about doing so. I think most clients and most unit trust investors out there probably have an offshore allocation in their overall portfolio. As we just mentioned in December, diversification, specifically offshore diversification into different asset classes and certain stocks and technologies that simply don't exist on our stock exchange has been taken into account by most of the asset managers in South Africa. And if you're investing into certain cautious or stable or balanced or certain multi-asset funds that we would call them, even certain flexible funds, generally, most of them would have a specific offshore allocation. So most individuals probably has a specific offshore allocation within their investment portfolio right now. Now, that being said, I think most or a lot of clients out there or potential clients out there are looking at their portfolio and saying, should I have a larger percentage of my overall assets invested into a global economy rather than fixed in South Africa? Yeah. Now, once again, having spoken to a lot of clients and individuals over the years, I think what people miss, they might have a 20 or 30 or 40% investment allocation offshore within their portfolio. But we're looking at the entire net worth. They might have a house worth several millions in South Africa, cars, and we actually dial it back. A very large percentage, and often 90-95% of their overall net assets are based in South Africa. So a lot of clients are looking at this and saying, should I have a large percentage of my overall net worth invested offshore? And obviously going through some balanced or stable or cautious type funds, it's a relatively small allocation, in terms of the client's overall net worth. So we're looking at increasing overall, asset allocation for offshore investment purposes. There are generally two ways to go about doing direct offshore investing. The first one is what we call an asset swap. Now, effectively, within the South African legislation, asset managers and management companies and certain other regulated entities are allowed to invest up to 45% of their overall assets via an asset swap offshore. Now, what that practically means is if you're investing via this entity, which could be a stockbroker or management company, as I've mentioned, effectively, they are moving the hard cash offshore into the relevant investment vehicle, but it sits on their balance sheet in South Africa. Now, these regulations around a 45% could change. And if they change, they are decreased or for whatever reason, in the rand weakens or the offshore market as a significant run, they could breach these limits and force clients to bring certain percentages back, which obviously has certain risks. In most cases, though, when you're dealing with a large life insurance company, they have very, very big balance sheets in terms of the life insurance assets and the pools of cash behind it. So generally, the overall risk around that is very, very limited. But one could go through a global equity fund, which is based in South Africa and asset swaps the money out and have 100% allocation within their fund as an offshore investment vehicle. Additionally, and interesting enough, I think a lot of clients and individuals don't know that once you mature your retirement annuity or pension into what we call a living annuity, which means you've retired and you're not drawing off your pension, it's no longer regulated under Regulation 28. And you can actually invest 100% of your living annuity offshore. So a lot of clients do have local assets and fixed income and other relatively low risk assets in South Africa. and are looking for a larger global exposure to their overall net wealth, and are moving their full living annuities offshore for long-term growth. So I think there's different ways to go about doing so. When clients are looking for direct offshore investing and not going by an asset swap, effectively, when dealing with a foreign exchange dealer, it's become a lot less complicated to do so. So the first $1 million of a client's investment can be moved without too many hiccups or too many hoops to jump through. And when dealing with a foreign exchange dealer, they can effectively move the cash into an offshore investment vehicle or where the cash needs to go. Fairly simple process. However, the next 10 million does require SARS approvals. Now, that would be, is your tax up to date and certain checks and balances in that regard? And obviously, from a South African perspective, trying to stop cash moving out of these huge tax bills still in South Africa. Once again, most of the foreign exchange dealers and certainly the people we deal with will go through that process with you. And it'll become relatively simple. So clients are looking to move their first million, the next 10 million, but anything over 11 million out of the country, that's where certain Reserve Bank approvals are required. Now, once again, there are specialists that go to Reserve Bank, go through this process, and it's not that laborious or tedious to go through this process. So moving money directly out of the country has become relatively simple with certain partners and specialists that can help you throughout this process. Once that money has moved out through a direct investment process and not an asset swap, there are certain tax advantages in terms of currency valuations or perhaps the rand weakening over the longer term. But once again, moving back to good financial advice, this is dependent on each client's specific goals. And I think just moving money out of the country without looking at your specific estate plan, looking at your tax positioning, would probably be irresponsible. There are a lot of investment vehicles, both locally and offshore, which can decrease certain estate duties, can decrease certain tax payables in a very legal and prudent way, the likes of endowments and other vehicles that are available. So I'll go back to the point as mentioned last year and in previous videos. Speak to a qualified and experienced financial advisor about your specific goals and needs. I think there's risks if you're not a specialist in this field and doing things in the right way.
That's very, very helpful, Mark. There's a lot of detail there. Is Warwick able to assist in these type of transactions as well? Do you have specialists that also assist clients with wishing to invest offshore?
Yeah, Warwick as a business is a local and international wealth specialist business. Through our partnership with Orion Investment Managers as well as associated companies offshore, we're able to look at a holistic plan, the moving of currencies, foreign exchange requirements, SARS approvals, Reserve Bank approvals, looking at the right tax consequences of whichever move needs to happen, longer term planning around that. So most of our clients has a relatively significant allocation to offshore investing, and we still think that there's value to that long term. But once again, it does come down to each client, and Warwick certainly can assist clients with this process.
Brilliant. Always good to speak to you, Mark. Look forward to speaking to you again next month. And best wishes for a very successful 2026 to you and to all our viewers as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, guys.